Right now.
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 Right
Right now.
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 Because it's time to write now.
Right 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 now.
Welcome to a daily live writing session where I'm going to show you my process for the third draft of The Last Scarecrow. This is a live reading and a line edit. I'm going to show the writing on screen and I'll just show you this is what I would normally be doing if I wasn't on camera. My goal is to help you with the writing process. So the next time that you're working on a book, you're working on a story, a screenplay, whatever it is, that you can take things that work and then make your story even better. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Kaufman, daily writing streamer, fantasy author, and dragon enthusiast. So let's get started because I am ready to write now. All right, and as you all can see, I already have the software stuff set up here. Cheryl, welcome, my friend. Good to see you. I think today the writing vibe is going to go pretty well. So last night I got through this chapter, but I was like struggling at the end of the night. I'm like, oh God, I want to get to the next chapter because the next chapter is super cool. But we are going to get into it. So all right, so let's see, we're going to get into it. And let's see. So my goal is today, I got to knock out this chapter. I was feeling a little iffy on some of the style in the middle of it, but let's see. Let's see what we see. So we're also going to get introduced to the midpoint antagonist. Ooh, the Tiger King. So let's see if the midpoint antagonist is still as cool as I had hoped. Hey, what's up, No? Long time no chat, my friend. Chapter 24. Chapter 24. The Tiger King. Only to wake up and find the true horror of it all, Scarecrow exclaimed, arms spread wide. What was it? Squeaked a tiny black-nosed badger on his shoulder as its dull claws dug in. Scarecrow peered around at the few nearby animals gathered around him. The porcupine's spines retracted, while the vibrant green mantis watched without blinking from a sloth's graying thick coat. Even in a nearby cell, a strange bouncing animal with a pouch-inlaid stomach and a three-pronged antlered ox had gone still. Shadows played from the single inlaid sconce against the nearby wall, casting an eerie light. Scarecrow rose to his feet. A sunflower secreting muck from its petals. The badger gasped, while audible sighs of relief echoed from the others. The Cobra King spat with an annoyed hiss. Sunflowers can eat my tail if they think swamps are theirs. Well, Gore shrugged. That explains how we survived the dream state without meeting death. Without meeting death? Scarecrow echoed. Gore nodded, but the badger squeaked up. Those who dream never wake up. But if they never wake up, how would you know? Scarecrow trailed off as he saw fear wash across his listener's eyes. Instead, he patted the badger, its wide eyes and oversized paws betraying its youth. The tiny animal nuzzled reassuringly against his shoulder. Scarecrow groaned. His stories hadn't quite attracted the crowd they were hoping for. At least he had received a prominent neigh from a nearby cell. The room was spacious, with many cages and cells of all shapes and sizes, yet none were locked or appeared to have been used in ages. Many of the doors were missing or lay on the stone floor. Most of the prisoners had split into smaller groups in their cells. We can fix this. Most of the prisoners had split into smaller groups in their cells. The rafters. Scarecrow glanced up at the shadowed rafters. Scarecrow glanced up at the shadowed rafters where yellow key, where multiple yellow key eyes watch them, waiting. Ooh, it's kind of creepy, actually. That's good. Yeah. Instead of fumbling with his collar again, Scarecrow looked to Gore, who shrugged and raised 5 fingers. So much for enticing allies. Instead of fumbling with his collar again, Scarecrow looked to Gore, who shrugged and raised 5 fingers. So much for enticing strong allies. This indicated 5, at least 5 animals willing to help. He looked down. He gazed. He smiled. He smiled at the porcupine. He smiled at the porcupine and praying mantis, who eyed each other. Who eyed each other warily. So much for enticing strong allies. Who were eyeing each other. Who were eyeing each other warily. He smiled at the porcupine and praying mantis, who were eyeing each other warily. So much for enticing strong allies. Liar! Accused a figure from behind him. Scarecrow felt a hot breath against his neck. He turned to face large turquoise eyes that shifted to sunlight yellow, then deepened to rose red. From another cell, Cottonball's forehead pressed against the bars as his arms slipped between them, wrapping around Scarecrow's neck and pulling him close. Why did you follow me, demon? The rabbit whispered into one of his ears. From within Scarecrow's peripheral vision, crimson eyes glared at him. He struggled to get away, gripping the rabbit's white and pink shaved forearm. I didn't. I only ended up in the woods because of Pebble, a pixie. Demon owns pixies. Cottonball's grip tightened as Scarecrow grasped, trying to break free. The rabbit's voice, now velvety smooth, whispered in his other ear. Pay him no mind. He has trust issues. Scarecrow glanced over his other shoulder at Violet Eyes. Voice raised, the rabbit hollered. Look around! We're animals, but what is this creature? A sack of straw? Not my master. No. Cottonball paused, yelping in pain. The tiny badger had burrowed its teeth into Cottonball's arm, allowing Scarecrow to slip free. The rabbit grabbed the badger in one hand and chucked it aside. In the disruption, Gory charged out of the cell and rounded the corner to catch the badger just in time. Ignoring the bear, Cottonball glared at Scarecrow. I don't think we need ignoring. Cottonball glared at Scarecrow. His eyes morphed to a sickly green. His eyes morphed to a sickly green as the rabbit gripped the bars, eyes shifting from sun yellow to rose red. The dull gray bars turned into a shade of rose red. The dull gray bars turned into a shade of red. We'll keep like that. The dull gray bars turned into a shade of rose red as the bars melted away beneath his grip. Gore gripped the rabbit by the shoulder. Gore grabbed Gore grabbed the rabbit by the shoulder, but without looking away, Conball jabbed the bear in the stomach, sending him stumbling back. The rabbit's eyes turned to orange as he kicked the melted bars out of his way and began to step through. I hate liars. We both do. His voice, light. His voice, now light and whimsical. I hate liars. I hate liars. We both do, Scarecrow cried. I'm on a mission to stop the first demon. The rabbit paused, his eyes turning bright pink as he looked away. My mission? Eyes growing rosier? For eternity. Scarecrow clenched his fist, seeing hope in Conball's eyes for the first time. The rabbit scared him beyond all measure, but if he could convince an animal of such strength to join them, maybe they could stop the fight before it began. He glanced over his shoulder at the small animals, watching with terrified wonder. He gripped his chest. Maybe he could save them. His need to help felt like a compulsion that pressed him onwards. That pressed him forward. Palm up, he reached a hand towards Cotton Ball. Palm up, he reached a hand towards Cotton Ball, smiling. Let's fight together and save these animals, adding thoughtfully. For eternity? Let's go adding uncertainly. Adding uncertainly. For eternity? Conball's eyes twinkled a deep shade of pink. He looked up to Scarecrow. Hopeful. Recollection flitted across his eyes suddenly. With a whisper, I remember the scarecrows. Eyes wide, Scarecrow faltered. You what? A hoot echoed as a key dropped from the shadows above and landed beside the rabbit, pulling him back, yanking him back into the nearby cell. Yanking him back into the nearby cell, into the opposite cell. Smirking, Conball looked to Scarecrow as his eyes shifted to a steel gray, confident and firm. His stance became absolute. He smiled blatantly, revealing a silver gemstone clenched between his teeth before blowing Scarecrow a kiss. Without looking away, Cottonball closed a hand around the key's throat. The key's brown pupils bled of color, and its fur paled to a dull gray, as though its very color were being siphoned away. A clap echoed throughout the room. Invisible cords of agony ripped down Scarecrow's shoulders, through his chest, and across every limb. He collapsed to the ground, burning, tightening, stretching. He cried out, time lost meaning. Only catching his breath when the pain had ceased, he twitched, expecting its return at any moment. A quick glance around the room indicated all prisoners had shared similar fates. Even the silhouettes of animals 5 times his size. Even the silhouettes of animals 5 times his size lay huddled in faraway cells. Standing above Cottonball was a massive key, with bare-chested lavender white skin. His long black fur rippled across burly legs and forearms. The key's long black fur rippled across burly legs and forearms. Standing above Cottonball was a massive key with bare-chested lavender white skin. The key's long black fur rippled across burly legs and forearms. A sash lay across his chest and waist, heavy with the odd boomerang-like weapons. He gave off a presence that demanded attention. He inspected the twitching key on the ground. The massive key inspected the twitching key on the ground, who was mumbling. The massive key inspected the twitching key on the ground. The massive key inspected the fallen soldier. The fallen. No, we'll go twitching. We want to keep it. The massive key inspected the twitching key on the ground, who was mumbling incoherently. The massive key made a clicking sound. The massive key formed a clicking sound with his lips. The massive key formed a clicking sound with his lips. Two keys swung from sights unseen, landed on the ground with a thud, and carried the graying victim away. The massive black key leaned down and sniffed the rabbit, who spasmed from the pain but glared up defiantly. So distasteful, the black key stated sardonically as he pushed a pair of tiny lenses up the bridge of his nose with the back of his knuckles. The lenses, albeit small, made his dark eyes appear large and intelligent. Cotton Ball, eyes still gray, clenched his fist as his collar turned blood red. He reached out to grab the massive key, who simply swatted him away with an annoyed no. The massive key grabbed Cotton Ball by the nose and smacked the back of his head until the silver gem popped out of the rabbit's mouth. Caught with the swipe of a meaty hand, the key pocketed it within his sash. He'll like you. After making another clicking sound, two more keys swung out from the pitch black ceiling and grabbed the rabbit by either arm, dragging him toward the cell's entrance. The rabbit's collar remained red, but only subdued laughter escaped him. The dominating black key stepped through the newly created space between the bars. His lens-covered eyes fell on Scarecrow. And what are you? I'm... Scarecrow stuttered with a gulp and looked at Gore on the ground nearby. Looked at Gore on the ground of the nearby cell. Looked at Gore on the ground of the nearby cell, who was shaking his head. A scarecrow, I think. Let's go. A scarecrow faltering under the keys. Faltering under the intimidating gaze. I'm Scarecrow stuttered with a gulp and looked at Gore on the ground of the nearby cell, who was shaking his head. A scarecrow faltering under the intimidating gaze. I think. I am the whip. The massive key leaned down. The whip leaned down and tapped Scarecrow forcefully on the forehead. His forearms bulged as he inspected Scarecrow with pure fascination. As if trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, as if contemplating a decision, the whip rose. Your eyes speak one truth, yet your form, kicking at Scarecrow's worn arms as stuffing leaked through, speaks another. A true oddity. He trailed off, letting his words hang in the air before making another clicking sound, before clicking and exiting the cell, before making another clicking sound and exiting the cell. Shouting over his shoulder, "To the king!" He slammed his chest with a fist. Other shouts of "To the king" and chest bumps echoed in the distance. A thump hit the ground behind Scarecrow. He felt a kick to the gut as the edge of his coat whipped him in the face. The key with the triangle patch of fur hooted gleefully and kicked him again until he rose to his feet. The key barked at Scarecrow with hoots until he staggered out of the cell where Cotton Ball lay mumbling. Scarecrow shrugged as he passed Gore on the ground in the nearby cell. The whip had stopped outside of the next cell, watching them. Gore trembled, still recoiling from the pain. Gore trembled, still recoiling from the pain. He rose to his feet and roared, "I challenge the king!" A chorus of hoots from the rafters above echoed in the darkness as three keys dropped down to surround the grizzly. However, the whip lifted a finger into the air, turning briefly. What brings a grizzly so far from the swamps? Gore gritted his teeth, wary as he checked each of the primates circling him. What brings a key above ground? The whip snorted. He eyed the grizzly up and down and clicked to the ceiling. He eyed the grizzly up and down and clicked, turning away. The whip snorted. He eyed the grizzly up and down and clicked, turning away. All right, we're going to get rid of that. All right, so the whip snorted. He eyed the grizzly up and down and clicked over his shoulder before striding away. The whip snorted. He eyed the grizzly and clicked over his shoulder before striding away. I like that a little bit more. Let's see. 4 keys dropped from the ceiling in gleaming white metal and the shiny boomerangs at their waists. They hooted at Scarecrow, pushing him to follow after the whip. Looking over his shoulder, the keys hooted at Gore, who set the badger on the ground. The badger scampered away, hiding between the porcupine and a squirrel whose eyes glowed like twin coals. The badger scampered away, hiding between the porcupine and a dazed squirrel whose eyes glowed like twin coals. Gore trailed after Scarecrow, while the remaining keys pushed along. Dragged Cotton Ball. Cotton Ball. Gore trailed after Scarecrow, while the remaining keys dragged Cotton Ball. Dragged a Cotton Ball along, dazed and mumbling. Gore trailed after Scarecrow, while the remaining keys dragged Cotton Ball along, mumbling incoherently. Their procession zigzagged between battered cages and prisoner-filled cells. King slithered against the wall, stopping short before a jaguar and hyena circling one another. Near the room's massive opening, a raccoon hung from a ceiling, trembling beneath the red eyes of a salamander perched atop its head. Beneath the red eyes of the salamander perched atop its head. Near the room's massive opening, a raccoon hung from a ceiling, trembling beneath the salamander's red eyes perched atop its head. Near the room's massive opening, a raccoon hung from a ceiling, trembling beneath the salamander. Trembling beneath the salamander's red eyes, perched atop its head. The passing keys hooted, causing them to crash to the ground. Laughter ensued. The passing keys hooted, caused them to crash to the ground. Laughter ensuing. Hey, what's up, zombie legs? I always see you pop up. See a ton of AI imaging. What's with that? I'm not sure actually. So you said like a ton of AI imaging. Not sure. Maybe for the maybe when I do the writing sprints, because I use randomly AI generated images as kind of just placeholders for people to look at. So that could be what you're referring to. I'm not sure. The book cover for Scarecrow was designed by my cover design artist, which was super cool. I was really proud of about that. So it might be what you're referring to, but I'm not sure. As they exited the room, Scarecrow glanced back at all of the prisoners' eyes watching them, while the many yellow eyes of the keys flickered from the dark rafters above. As they exited the room, Scarecrow glanced back at all the prisoners' eyes watching them, while the many yellow eyes of the keys flickered from the dark rafters above. Nice flickered. Oh. Wonder if this works. All animals, no scarecrows anywhere. Was he truly the last one? Gore met his gaze and nodded reassuringly. He returned the nod with a forced smile and glanced warily at Cotton Ball being dragged along. Did he know of more scarecrows out there? Did he really know? Did he really know of more scarecrows out there? Let's say that. Let's go. Prisoners. Prisoners' eyes were watching them from their cells while. Let's see. I think this could work. As they exited the room, Scarecrow glanced back. Prisoners' eyes were watching them from their cells, while the many yellow eyes of the keys flickered from the dark rafters above. Yeah, I think I could see why that would be better like that. As they exited the room, Scarecrow glanced back. Prisoners' eyes were watching them from their cells, while the many yellow eyes of the keys flickered from the dark rafters above. All animals, no scarecrows anywhere. Was he truly the last one? Gore met his gaze and nodded reassuringly. He returned the nod with a forced smile and glanced warily at Cotton Ball, being dragged along. Did he really know more? Did he really know of more scarecrows out there? They passed down a massive stone hallway with few lit sconces and dark rafters above. They passed down a massive stone hallway. They passed through a massive stone hallway. They passed through a stone hallway with few lit sconces and dark rafters above. Every once in a while, hoots that sounded like laughter bounced. Every once in a while, echoes that sound like laughter bounced off the walls. Every once in a while, hoots that sounded like laughter bounced off the carried. Every once in a while, hoots that sounded like laughter bounced off the walls. They passed by another room full of mismatched cells and cages, all damaged or unlocked. But the few species in this room were larger than all of them combined. A graying, weathered elephant with a bucket over its head took up nearly half the room. A graying, weathered animal with a large trunk, most likely an elephant with a bucket over its head, took up nearly half the room. A graying, weathered animal. Let's go this. A graying, weathered animal, most likely an elephant, A graying weathered animal, most likely an elephant, with a bucket over its head, took up nearly half of the room, while the long neck of the giraffe extended down as it watched him, as it watched them. Another reptile and a massive furry mammoth of an animal were mostly obscured by the shadows as they remained motionless, watching, waiting. A green scaled reptiles. A green scaled reptile. A darkly green scaled reptile snapped at them from the shadows, causing a startling scarecrow. A darkly green scaled reptile snapped up at them from the shadows, startling scarecrow. A furry mammoth lay resting against the farthest wall, sleeping. A furry mammoth lay resting against the nearest wall, fast asleep. A darkly green-scaled reptile snapped at them from the shadows, startling scarecrow. A darkly green-scaled reptile snapped at them from the shadows. Actually, let's mix that. A furry mammoth lay resting against a nearby wall, fast asleep. A darkly green-scaled reptile snapped at them from the shadows. Scarecrow scurried along, keeping his head down as they passed by a few more rooms of prisoners. Hey, what's up, Zombie? So, Zombie, that's a really, really great question about AI. And I think we've had the AI conversation multiple times before on this channel. Do you think being loose with AI images could spread to being loose with AI writing? I see a ton of AI authors at the moment. It's a little sad, in my opinion. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I think with AI, there's always going to be a lot of bad actors out there, so to speak, and a lot of people trying to cut corners. Um, I think there's just so much. I think there's so much noise going on out there. I believe in using AI for improving processes and efficiencies, but I don't believe that you should use AI to write a story for you. There's going to be a lot of writers who'll use AI to write a story for them. And I know there's definitely a lot of beliefs in how writers, readers, artists feel on both sides of the debate. But as compared to using it for AI images, yeah, and I mean, I don't think being loose with AI images would spread to writing. I think if people are going to use AI for writing, I think they're going to use it regardless of AI images. In all honesty, yeah. Yeah, and I think that is too. I mean, when I look at like AI imaging, I like to think of using AI imagery as more of like a placeholder. Personally, for writers who as a placeholder for writers who don't have the resources to pay for artists, and then paying for the artists once the writers are have the money. I think that's generally how I've kind of treated AI imagery, but So once again, I think with when I generally use AI imagery myself, I usually take a base AI image and then I edit it enough where I try to make it my own. But I don't know if there's a right or wrong way. Everyone's very divided on AI, but it's absolutely a great question. They are. So a lot of the images, like I said, I start with a base AI model, and then I edit, and then I edit and Photoshop myself to try to make what I'm trying to do with all the AI with my stuff. So I've kind of like figured out a process where it's like it starts with one thing, and then I try to edit it so it feels unique to what I'm trying to accomplish. So, but yeah, good call out. It's interesting because in 5, 10 years ago, before AI was really a thing, so many of these things wouldn't have even been possible. It really wouldn't have. I think it also creates more opportunities. I think it really does. I think there's a lot of fear for AI, and there's a lot with copywriting and like AI being trained on a lot of stuff that like wasn't right. Like that's a whole conversation. I understand why people are upset about it, and rightly so. I think for me, I think AI gives does give people more opportunities. I don't know where the morality of it is. I kind of go back and forth, but I think in like the short term, I think to try to like since I do believe in using I think if I'm going to use it, I'm going to use it as either a placeholder or I'm going to try to adjust it so it feels like it's more of my own style. I'm not usually the type of person who will just take an AI image or thing and then just say like that's mine. I try to give it like a editing and variation in a sense. And then hopefully once I'm farther enough along in my career, I'll be able to I'll have the resources where I can pay artists to make all the stuff. So I'm kind of like with my Last Scarecrow cover. I had paid for a cover designer, did all the Scarecrow stuff, and I'm like, I'm so proud. It's like the coolest thing ever. Mm. Yeah, you know what's interesting, Zombie, is I've now streamed for 733 days consecutively. The majority of this book I've written on stream. I write the majority of my stuff on stream like this. I don't think most people I think like a lot of author tubers will say a lot of writers and author tubers like write their stuff off screen. I think I'm in a unique position where I've written the majority of this story on screen. There are very few people who can accuse me of using AI to write this book because I've spent 700 days writing it literally on the stream. Oh man. So like I think that's where I'm kind of in a unique position because I've literally shown people through my actions and through what I do. Like I always put the word processing software on screen so people can see that it's me writing. But a lot of writers and authors don't do that. It's understandably so. Like it's no slack to anybody who doesn't do it. It's just something that I wanted to do to stand out. But yeah, thanks for that. The cover is so awesome. I'm like so proud of my artist, by the way. I got like the coolest cover design artist. I'm like so proud of it. The cover image was exactly what I wanted it to come out like. And by the way, so if I saw you ask that question, I got a little distracted with the conversation. But the Last Scarecrow is a really cool story. By the way, I usually recommend if people want to know like more about it to check out the website because I've been asked that question so often. But in a nutshell, the Last Scarecrow is about a our hero Scarecrow um, who wakes up in a world with no memories. He has to travel through a world where animals, creatures, and beasts are losing their memories to a phenomenon called the nothingness. Many of the tribes and many of the surviving characters are the last of their kind, and they are fearful of this prolific character called the First Demon. Scarecrow must travel across the lands to remember who he is, and hopefully be joined by these fellow creatures, a feisty pixie named Pebble and an eccentric crow named Mr. Crow. and a lovelorn grizzly bear named named Gore as they go on a quest to stop the first demon. Only if they can remember why they started on their journey in the first place. Yep, that's the blurb. I'm gonna have to get better about saying that more concisely, but that's the blurb. But yeah, I also my website designer created the Scarecrow website. So if y'all want to like know more about the book, I always recommend go check out the Last Scarecrow website. And it's not selling you anything. There's nothing to buy or there's nothing to buy on the website. So just if you want to know more about the book right now. So thanks for asking that. I really appreciate that. And I just dropped that there for you for anyone who wants to check it out. Zombie legs. Okay, thanks, dude. That's super fair. Something to be proud of. Just saying on the front page, you come across as an AI author. That's all. Oh, that's actually really interesting. Zombie, thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll give it some thought. That's really interesting. Thanks for the shout out. I really appreciate I appreciate honest conversation. So thanks for that. Interesting. Okay. All right. Back into it. All right, so let's see if this paragraph actually works. So they passed through a stone hallway with few lit sconces and dark rafters above. Every once in a while, hoots that sounded like laughter bounced off the walls. They passed by another room full of mismatched cells and cages, all damaged or unlocked. But the few species in this room were larger than all of them combined. But the few species in this room were enormous. But the few species in this room were enormous. A graying, weathered animal, most likely an elephant with a bucket over its head, took up nearly half the room, while the long neck of the giraffe extended down as it watched them. A furry mammoth lay resting against the nearest wall, fast asleep. A darkly green-scaled reptile snapped at them from the shadows. Scarecrow scurried along, keeping his head down as they passed by a few more rooms of prisoners. The long, dim hallway eventually reached a crossroads. All hallways, with all the hallways looking similar. They marched forward in silence. They marched forward in silence until they were ushered. They marched forward in silence until they were ushered outside onto a short walkway, connecting to a short walkway connected to a narrow bridge, swinging back and forth. While crossing the bridge, Gore grunted. Gore grunted, who nodded to the right. Squarely in the center of an arena was a giant golden chalice on a podium. He looked back at Gore, who discreetly ran a finger along his mouth. He looked back at Gore, who held up a finger against his lips. He looked back at Gore and shrugged. What was so special about a giant cup? Maybe he was hungry. Maybe he was thirsty. Oh man. Oh, Scarecrow. Oh man, I really do go back and forth between Scarecrow having smart moments and not quite so smart moments. The long, dim hallway eventually reached a crossroads with all the hallways looking similar. They marched forward in silence until they were ushered outside onto a short walkway connecting to a narrow bridge. They marched through the hallways and crossroads in silence until they were ushered outside onto a short walkway connecting to a narrow bridge swinging back and forth. Crossing the bridge, Gore grunted, who nodded to the right. Gore grunted from behind, who nodded to the right. Squarely in the center of an arena was a giant golden chalice on a podium. He looked back at Gore and shrugged. What was so special about a giant cup? Maybe the bear was thirsty. Maybe the grizzly was thirsty. Yeah, it's I go back and forth on that. There's like, because there's moments where I very intentionally make Scarecrow oblivious, and I want it to be like an endearing character thing, but it might make readers feel like, oh, okay, well, he's dumb, but it's supposed to be very contrasting, where there's moments where he's extremely intelligent and then moments where he's extremely oblivious. And I probably have to make those contrasting moments more even more obvious, so that way readers know, like, oh, it's not because he's poorly written, it's an intentional choice. Oof. Headed to take youngest laundry over to her house because their plumbing froze. Oof. You guys dealing with all your snow and frozenness over there. Give us some of your snow. We need it over here. Scarecrow, Captain Oblivious. They reached the other side and crossed back into another wide open stone structure. They reached the other side and crossed back into. They reached the other side and crossed back into and entered. They reached the other side and entered another wide open stone structure. The walls were lined with metal weapons of all shapes and sizes. The walls were lined with metal weapons of all shapes and sizes, some sharp, some dull, and some peculiar. He recognized some shovels, rakes, and pitchforks, but they were crudely adjusted. He recognized some shovels, rakes, and pitchforks, but they were crudely adjusted with spikes and sharp edges. He shuddered at just how many bits of the metal were stained. He shuddered at just how many bits of the metals were stained in red, brown, and even purple specks of blood. At least they weren't alive. At least these weapons weren't alive. At least these objects weren't alive. He hoped. It's calling back to a previous chapter. That's funny. On either side, rows of keys armed. We haven't gotten much snow, but dang it off. We are going to be that cold. Then let us have moisture. I know. It's kind of same for us over here. It's been like really cold, but we haven't gotten any snow. It's kind of annoying. Let's see. But they were sharpened and crudely adorned with spikes. He recognized some shovels, rakes, and pitchforks, but they were crudely adjusted. Crudely, you're right. Yours sounds better. But they were sharpened and crudely adorned with spikes. Yeah, yours is better. Thanks, Mom Maggie. On either side, rows of keys armed with crude weapons galore. On either side, rows of keys. On either side, rows of keys in various colored metals were armed with crude weapons. With the crude on either side, rows of keys in various colored metals were armed with the crude, shiny boomerang weapons along their sashes. They stood motionless. They stood motionless, glaring straight ahead. They stood motionless, glaring towards the end. They stood motionless, glaring towards the end of the room. On either side, rows of keys in various colored metals were armed with the crude, shiny boomerang weapons. We don't need crew this time. With the shiny boomerang weapons along their sashes. They stood motionless, glaring towards the end of the room. They stood motionless, looking towards the end of the room. Sounds like he got the weapon of choice for the snakes. At the end of the room, besides a large passable hole in the wall overlooking the arena, was at the end of the room. Okay. They stood motionless, looking towards the end of the room. At the end of the room. At the end of the room, they stood motionless, looking away from them. At the end of the room, looking up ahead. They stood motionless, looking up ahead. Looking ahead. At the end of the room, besides a large passable hole in the wall. Passable. At the end of the room, besides a large hole in the wall overlooking the arena, was a makeshift chair nearly the height of the room. Scarecrow covered his mouth. The chair was made of bloodied, scraped, and torn animal hides. And sitting on the chair had to be the Tiger King. And sitting on the chair had to be, welcome. Well, let's see. How do I want the Tiger King? Welcome to the armory. Decreed a voice, smooth as silk. Warriors, yet gruff and demeaning. The whip whispered into their leader's ear. The whip strode up to the monarch, whispered into their leader's ear. The whip strode up to the monarch, whispered into his ear without taking eyes off them, and pounded his chest. and pounded his chest. He took up a firm stance behind. He took up a firm stance, arms crossed, behind the chair. He took up a firm stance, arms crossed, in the corner of the room. Welcome to the armory, decreed a voice smooth as silk. Welcome to the armory, decreed a voice smooth as silk. Warriors, yet gruff and demeaning. The whip strode up to the monarch, whispered into his ear without taking eyes off them, and pounded his chest. He took up a firm stance, arms crossed, in the corner of the room. Scarecrow was pushed beside a white timber wolf on its stomach. Scarecrow was pushed to stand beside a white timber wolf on its stomach, also collared and growling. Beside him, the rabbit. Beside him, Cotton Ball. Beside him, Cotton Ball, now quiet, was dragged and tossed to the ground. Beside him, Cotton Ball, now quiet, was dragged and dumped on the ground, while Gore planted himself firmly next in line. They waited. The Tiger King exuded regality. The Tiger King exuded regal authority with each pronounced step toward them, yet his hunched stance spoke of something stronger, harder, even savage. His orange, black, and white stripes glistened from the stream of sunlight shining through the nearby hole outside. His orange, black, and white stripes glistened in the sunlight streaming through the nearby hole. He swung the end of his tail in circles, nonchalantly, and only stopped to chomp at the wolf, revealing razor-sharp teeth speckled with blood. He ran a single pointed claw along his own face, gliding the nail along a freshly burned scar stretching from just beneath his lips to a half-charred ear. Gently tapping a silvered crown resting between his ears, he smiled widely, the smile never touching his eyes. Ooh. I do like that. I still do like my initial Tiger King setup. Whether you're here in the live or you're watching on the replay, what do you think of this initial Tiger King intro? I'm curious. I'm asking myself. I'm wondering if it conveys the image that I'm going for. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, I could get behind that. Yeah, I think that's a little stronger. I could see why that would. So, the Tiger King exuded regal authority with each pronounced step toward them, yet his hunched stance spoke of something stronger, harder, even savage. His striped fur glistened in the sunlight, streaming through the jagged hole. He swung the end of his tail in lazy circles, only stopping to chomp at the wolf, revealing razor-sharp teeth speckled with blood. He ran a single-pointed claw along his own face, tracing a freshly burned scar that stretched from just beneath his lips to a half-charred ear. Then, gently tapping a silvered crown resting between his ears, he smiled widely. The smile never touched his eyes. You may bow. The Tiger King spoke casually. A resounding chest bump from the keys echoed. A resounding chest bump from the keys echoed around the room. Something sharp jabbed the back of Scarecrow's leg, forcing him to a knee alongside the wolf and rabbit. The room became silent, standing on edge, waiting. Eyeing the lot of them precariously, the Tiger King opened his mouth to speak. Eyeing the lot of them precariously, the Tiger King opened his mouth to speak, waiting in anticipation while twirling his tail. Spare the weak, or spoil the bold. Spare the weak, or spoil the bold. Spare the weak, or spoil the bold. Answer. Raising his paw beside his lips with a whisper. Wolfie and your king have a tiny disagreement. I can fix this slightly. Resting before the wolf. He smiled. Resting before the wolf, he grinned. Stopping before the wolf, he grinned. Stopping before the wolf, he grinned. Spare the weak, or spoil the bold. Raising his paw beside his lips with a whisper, Wolfie and your king have a tiny disagreement. I'll gift you one request for one correct answer. Because he chomped, he chomped his teeth. I'm generous. Stopping beside the wolf, he grinned. Spare the weak, or spoil the bold. Raising his paw beside his lips with a whisper, Wolfie and your king have a tiny disagreement. I'll gift you one request for one correct answer. Because he chomped his teeth, I'm generous. He chuckled under his breath, pointing first to Gore. Ooh, I went to Gore first. Spare the weak or spoil the bold. Raising his paw beside his, answer me this. Answer me this. Spare the weak or spoil the bold. Raising his paw beside his lips with a whisper. Help me. Wolfie and your king have a tiny disagreement. Raising his paw beside, answer me this. Spare the weak or spoil the bold. Raising his paw beside his lips with a whisper. Raising his paw beside his lips, he whispered. Wolfie and your king have a tiny disagreement. I'll gift you one request for one correct answer. Because, he chomped his teeth, I'm generous. He chuckled under his breath, pointing first to Gore. Emboldened, the grizzly began to step forward, crying out, I challenge, but was cut off in a roar as he dropped to his knees in a bout of pain, evident by his tensing muscles and gritting teeth. Emboldened, the grizzly stepped forward. Emboldened, the grizzly began to step forward, crying out, I challenge, but was cut off in a roar of pain. Was cut off in a roar of pain. Was cut off in a roar of pain. The collar flared violently. But was cut off in a roar of pain. The collar flared violently. But was caught up in a roar of pain. The collar flared violently. He dropped to his knees in a bout of. He dropped to his knees. Muscles tense. He dropped to his knees. Muscles tense, and teeth chattering, and paws shaking. He dropped to his knees. Muscles tense and paws shaking. The Tiger King approached Gore. The Tiger King approached Gore, chuckling all the while. Never ceasing. Chuckling all the while. Finally, he waved a claw toward the closest keys until the grizzly stopped cringing. He then gripped Gore by either shoulder. As a cub, I once heard tales of the grizzly's thousand. As a cub, I once heard tales of the grizzly's 1,000-day stand. Flight or fancy? He purred. Should we fight here, I wonder? He looked down upon Gore like a piece of meat, the grizzly staring back with a forced calm despite his twitching legs. He looked down upon Gore like a piece of meat, the grizzly staring back with a forced calm despite his twitching legs. Irrelevant, Gore muttered. The Tiger King quirked his head. A disagreement between a prisoner and a tyrant is a facade of malice. Only one answer matters in your eyes. Keeping his head bowed, he glanced up and spat. Again, your question, irrelevant. The Tiger King boomed with a laughter so grand it nearly shook the room. Roars of keys hooted alongside him. Roars of keys hooted alongside him. Words of a scholar. The Tiger King said between laughs. Words of a scholar. The Tiger King said between laughs. Do you think me mean, cruel, evil for this? He tapped the collar at Gore's neck playfully and leaned in menacingly. Survive the fighting, and you may challenge me. He stepped back, and this time to the keys. Is the Tiger King not generous? I'll allow this cub to die by my claws, if he survives. He boomed with laughter and shooed Gore aside, who was clenching his paws against the ground, but otherwise remained silent. The Tiger King stopped before Cotton Ball, who was crumpled on the ground and laughing with short-labored breaths. The floppy-eared animal simply rolled onto his back and cackled while rubbing himself down and whispering, "You stole my gems," and whispering, "My gems." The floppy-eared animal simply rolled onto his back and cackled while rubbing himself down and whispering, "Gems," repeatedly. Eyes wide, the Tiger King whistled. Eyes wide, the Tiger King whistled and pointed at the rabbit with crazed eyes. Eyes wide, the Tiger King whistled and pointed at the rabbit with crazed eyes. Eyes wide, the Tiger King whistled and pointed at the rabbit. Circling a finger in the air. Circling a finger in the air, the Tiger King whistled. Circling his finger in the air. Circling his finger circling his finger circling his finger Circling his finger in the air, the Tiger King whistled and pointed at the rabbit with crazed eyes. More keys broke out in hoots and hollers. Yeah, I could see that. Let's go. I think we could do that. Cool. Yeah, I think that's fine. The Tiger King circled a finger in the air, whistled, and pointed at the rabbit. More keys erupted in hoots and hollers. Scarecrow kept his gaze to the floor. Kept his gaze on the floor. Scarecrow kept his gaze on the floor. He even thought he heard the rabbit scoff. He even thought he heard Cotton Ball scoff. But it was lost to the roar of noise. Scarecrow kept his gaze on the floor. He even thought he heard Cotton Ball scoff, but it was lost to the roar of laughter. He heard the heavy footsteps of the tiger approaching him next. He heard the heavy. Scarecrow kept his gaze on the floor. He even thought he heard Cotton Ball scoff, but it was lost to the roar of laughter. He heard the heavy footsteps of the tiger approaching him next. Perhaps he could be reasoned with. Perhaps this king could be reasoned with. Perhaps this king could be reasoned with. And there was more to these callers. Perhaps this king could be reasoned with. He heard Pebble's voice in the back of his head saying not to be a dummy, and Crow's chortling. He heard Pebble's voice in the back of his head saying not to be a dummy, and Crow's chortling about him being a straw brain. All right, I see. So what I'm dealing with is there was this one part earlier in the chapter that I'd cut, which is referencing this part right here. But it does create a really nice tie-in to the Tiger King's initial response to him. All right, so I had originally cut that. I think we're going to go to the deleted scenes and just save this bit. So it was this one part that I had cut in the last. It was this one bit that I had cut in the last section. Don't know if it's necessary, but it did create a nice transition in this moment. He stopped. Okay, so he heard the heavy footsteps of the tiger approaching him next. Perhaps this king could be reasoned with. He heard Pebble's voice in the back of his head saying not to be a dummy, and crows chortling about him being a straw brain. He stopped himself from mumbling and looked up. Blocking his view, the Tiger King bent over. Don't tell me you are, he whistled. Like that one. The monarch trailed off. Blocking his view, the Tiger King bent over. Don't tell me you are. The monarch trailed off, stopping as if finally seeing Scarecrow for the first time. The tiger sniffed his straw from head to toe and prowled around him, sniffing some more, and prowled around him, inhaling. The Tiger King sniffed his straw from head to toe and prowled around him, inhaling deeply. What do we have here? The look on his face as he stopped before him was ravenous. The look on his face became ravenous. Hungry even. The tiger opened his mouth around his straw throat. Scarecrow gulped, eyeing those salivating teeth, trying to hold his ground and appear stalwart. He hoped his knees weren't trembling. The Tiger King opened his mouth around his straw throat. Scarecrow gulped, eyeing those salivating teeth, trying to hold his ground, and appear stalwart. He hoped his knees weren't trembling. I'm a scarecrow. The Tiger King snapped his teeth before Scarecrow's face. Is that right? He glanced back at the whip, who nodded. You smell absolutely. Leaning high over him, he licked his lips. Ravishing for straw. Scarecrow reminded himself of his goal. He couldn't allow himself to be eaten. That didn't sound very pleasant after all. Straw doesn't taste very good, he blurted out. The Tiger King paused, his demeanor becoming vicious, but he burst out laughing instead. Oh, you thought... He stopped himself. No, dear straw. It's not musty straw I speak of. It's... He tapped a single claw to his chest. He said, tapping a single claw to his chest. In here, I wonder. The Tiger King paused, his demeanor becoming vicious, but he burst out laughing instead. You thought... He stopped himself abruptly. No, no, dear straw. It's not musty straw I speak of. It's, he said, tapping a single claw to his chest. In here, I wonder. He nodded to the whip and strode back to his throne. Strode back to the chair. Scarecrow clenched his fists. He was so tired of being helpless to strange animals with big words, nonsensical words and rules. He was so tired of being helpless. He was so tired of feeling helpless against feeling. He was so tired of feeling helpless against strange animals with big, nonsensical. He was so tired of feeling helpless against strange animals with big, nonsensical words and rules that didn't make sense. And why were there no other scarecrows? And why did he not remember a burning thing? And why couldn't he remember anything about them? He shared a quick glance of mutual understanding with the Timberwolf. And why were so many animals in this world so? He shared a quick glance of mutual understanding with the Timberwolf. Thinking back to all of the prisoners, Scarecrow puffed his chest out. Scarecrow puffed his chest out, straightened his posture, and barked. If you spare the weak, they will die in these lands to nature's cruelty. But if you spoil the bold, they will grow weak by nature. My solution: spare the weak of their faults so they may become bold, and thus no bold need be spoiled. And Scarecrow paused, waiting for all eyes on him. You should be ashamed. Oh, man. Gore shook his head. Well, even the rabbit stopped mumbling. Well, even Cotton Ball stopped mumbling. The keys quieted down while the Tiger King glanced over his shoulder. Well, the keys quieted down while the Tiger King stopped. Well, the Tiger King froze and glanced over his shoulder. And why is that, Straw? Scarecrow wanted to back down, but he had to stay strong this time. He couldn't be afraid. He couldn't be afraid. If what he had seen about this monarch was true, he had to show strength. No more guessing. Because collaring and forcing us to fight isn't the way. It's shameful. I've seen such strength from the smallest animals to the largest. Unifying these animals and working together would take more strength, more courage. He eyed the nearby keys, some of which were stunned. Let us go, because I'm on a mission, he said, eyeing Gore, who shook his head violently, but he had to do what felt right. To stop the first demon. We need the brazier. We need your help. Silence. Because collaring and forcing us to fight isn't the way. It's shameful. I've seen such strength from the smallest animals to the largest. Unifying these animals and working together would take more strength, more courage. Would these scarecrows have survived if they were unified? Would the scarecrows or creators have survived if they were unified? He eyed the nearby keys, some of which were stunned. Let us go because I'm on a mission, he said. Let us go because I'm on a mission, he said, eyeing Gore, who shook his head violently, but he had to do what felt right. To stop the first demon. We need the brazier. We need your help. Silence. The keys were stunned. The keys were stunned. One even fell over as weapons clattered to the floor. Marchak, the whip, eyed him curiously. Gore sighed in frustration. Cottonball watched him. Cottonball watched him, fully present, eyes tinged in gold. The wolf looked up pleadingly. Oh, is that all? The Tiger King spun around. The Tiger King spun around slowly and serenely. You think me shameful for plucking these helpless, he pronounced with wide, mocking eyes, animals from their homes. He pounced towards from their holes. He pronounced with wide, mocking eyes, animals from their holes. He pounced towards him. Rather than be killed by storms of hellfire or winds of death. The Tiger King spun around slowly and serenely. Okay, actually, this is a good beat. The keys were stunned. Even one fell over as weapons clattered to the floor. The whip eyed him curiously. Gore sighed in frustration. Cottonball watched him fully present, eyes tinged in gold. The wolf looked up pleadingly. Oh, is that all? The Tiger King spun around slowly and serenely. You think me shameful for plucking these helpless? He pronounced with wide, mocking eyes. Animals from their holes. He pounced towards him. Rather than be killed by storms of hellfire or winds of death. Well, you think me shameful for saving these animals from those who would merely control, subserve, or annihilate? He towered over Scarecrow, forcing him to back down. A subtle fury had crept into his deep orange pupils as a part of the scar on his face broke open, bleeding onto Scarecrow. Strength will survive. He leaned in deeper until Scarecrow stumbled onto his back. He pronounced, Tiger King is salvation. Scarecrow stared up into those eyes of strength and hunger, recognizing that he should be afraid. But there had to be a reason. Scarecrow stared up into those eyes, into the cold eyes, into the cold, hard eyes of strength and hunger, recognizing that he should be afraid. Hunger. There had to be a reason for this Tiger King's actions. There had to be a reason for this Tiger King actions because there were multiple ways to show strength. because there was more than one way to show strength. Maybe if he could get through. Maybe he could get through if he just... Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of white as the rabbit lunged, as Cotton Ball lunged. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of white. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of white as Cotton Ball lunged at the Tiger King's throat with a dagger that had been tucked away. "No!" Scarecrow yelled, rolling aside and swatting the rabbit's arm down, sending the metal to plunge into the monarch's shoulder. "He can be reasoned with. He can be reasoned." "Demon!" The rabbit looked back. Cotton Ball looked back. "Demon!" Cotton Ball looked back, screeching at him with eyes of crimson red and chaotic fury. The Tiger King remained motionless, the rabbit's dagger sticking out of his shoulder as the rabbit clung onto it. The keys all around the room dashed forward, while the whip, whose arms were crossed, remained vigilant. The Tiger King held up one paw in the air, alerting the keys to back down. He looked down at the weapon protruding from his shoulder and laughed. His free claw shot out in one swift motion, but instead of reaching for the rabbit, his free claw shot out in one swift motion, but instead of reaching for the rabbit, his free claw shot out in one swift motion, but instead of reaching for the rabbit, he gripped the wolf's throat instead. He raised the timber wolf into the air as the animal gurgled. His free claw shot out in one swift motion. Instead of reaching for the rabbit, his claws pierced the wolf's throat instead. He then raised the timber wolf into the air as the animal gurgled and blood splattered everywhere. With a single motion, the wolf's neck snapped, cracked, and was tossed aside. Wow. That's intense. This is a great moment. I'm wondering if this is clear enough. Yeah, I think that's better. His free claw shot out and pierced the wolf's throat. Yeah, I think that's a little clearer. So the Tiger King raised one paw and the keys back down. He glanced at the weapon lodged in his shoulder and laughed. His free claw shot out and pierced the wolf's throat. He lifted the timber wolf into the air as it gurgled and blood splattered everywhere. With a single twist, the neck snapped and was tossed aside. Scarecrow backed away, horrified as all eyes turned to the Tiger King and the rabbit. As all eyes turned, Scarecrow backed away, horrified. Scarecrow backed away, horrified. The coloring of the rabbit's blade had turned as red as his eyes. The coloring of the rabbit's blade had turned as red as his eyes. Let's see other. The coloring of the rabbit's blade had turned. The coloring of the rabbit's blade had turned as red as his eyes. The coloring of the rabbit's blade had turned as red as his eyes. A cotton ball held a cherry red gemstone in his outstretched. And cotton ball clasped a cherry gemstone. Cotton ball clasped a cherry gemstone in with the toes. Cotton ball clasped a cherry gemstone between gemstone in his outstretched hand, in his outstretched paw. The coloring of the rabbit's blade turned red. The coloring of the rabbit's blade turned as red as his eyes. Cotton ball clasped a cherry gemstone in his outstretched paw. The fur, where the Tiger King's fur, the Tiger King's fur began draining of color at the source of the stab wound. The Tiger King's fur began draining of color. The Tiger King's fur began to drain of color at the source. The Tiger King's fur began to redden. Is redden even a word? Oh, reddening. I was like, I knew. Began reddening in color. The Tiger King's fur began reddening in color at the source of the stab wound. The Tiger King watched, amused. The pain never showing once. The Tiger King watched, amused. The pain never showed on his face. The pain never showed on his face as he rose. "This is no power of yours, thief." He leaned in as the rabbit gritted his teeth and raised another sword into the air. "But you will prune the weak." He chomped. Even though the fur on his arm was reddening, the Tiger King seemed to revel in his growing rage. The coloring of the rabbit's blade turned red as his eyes. Cotton Ball clasped a cherry gemstone between his toes. The Tiger King's fur began reddening in color at the source of this, and the Tiger King's fur began reddening in color at the source of the stab wound. The Tiger King watched, amused. The pain never showed on his face as he rose. "This is no power of yours, thief." He leaned in as Cotton Ball gritted his teeth and raised another sword into the air. Where it had come from was anyone's. Where it had originated was anyone's guess. But you will prune the weak for me. But you will prune the weak. The monarch chomped. But you will prune the weak. Even though the fur on his arm was reddening, the Tiger King seemed to revel in his growing rage. In the rage. "Die, fiend!" the rabbit cried. "Die, demon!" the rabbit cried. Cotton Ball cried. Cotton Ball cried, thrusting the sword at the Tiger King's other side. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside, and using the rabbit's own momentum, grabbed him by the arm and flung him over his head into the opposite wall. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside, and using the rabbit's own momentum, grabbed him by the arm and flung him over his head into the opposite wall. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside, and using the rabbit's own momentum, grabbed him by the arm and flung him into the opposite wall. The Tiger King plucked the dagger from his shoulder and licked the blood from the tip, laughing all the while as he towered over the rabbit. He wiped blood. He wiped blood from the stab wound. He wiped blood from the stab wound as his fur, as his matted fur regained its purple, its orange nature. Its dark orange nature. Regained. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside, and using the rabbit's own momentum, grabbed him by the arm and flung him into the opposite wall. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside, and using the casually. Let's break this up. The monarch casually kicked the incoming blade aside. Using the rabbit's own momentum, he grabbed him. He grabbed him by the arm, flinging. Using the rabbit's own momentum, he grabbed him by the arm and flung him into the opposite wall. The Tiger King plucked the dagger from his shoulder and licked the blood from the tip, laughing all the while, as he towered over the rabbit. He wiped blood from the stab wound as his matted fur regained its dark orange nature. "I see vengeance in your eyes, little rabbit. Little bunny." The Tiger King spoke, amused. "Let me guess. I ate your bunnies." "I see vengeance in your eyes, little rabbit." The Tiger King spoke, amused. "Let me guess. I ate your bunnies." The keys roared with laughter as they pounded their chests, creating a rhythmic beat that echoed throughout the stone room. The bloodlust in their eyes grew with each passing moment. The bloodlust in their eyes grew. All of them save for the whip. Who waited impatiently. Scarecrow glanced down at the hapless body of the wolf, bleeding out on the floor. Dumb Scarecrow. That animal didn't deserve to die. Why did he keep getting it wrong? The rabbit snarled. Cotton Ball snarled. My gems! He lunged at the Tiger King, diving under a passing swipe of the claw and crawling up his back. The rabbit had gotten hold of a rope, which he wrapped around the Tiger King's throat. The rabbit had somehow gotten hold of a rope, which he wrapped around the Tiger King's throat. The Tiger King tightened his stance and flexed his muscles as they bulged unceremoniously. The Tiger King tightened his stance and flexed his muscles as they bulged unceremoniously from his loosely draped garments. He glanced at Scarecrow, grinning with delight as if this were a game. The rabbit tightened his grip on the rope, but the tiger seemed unaffected by it. Cotton Ball tightened his grip on the rope, but the tiger seemed unaffected by it. In one fluid motion, the tiger reached behind his back with one paw, dug his claws into the rabbit's back, into Cotton Ball's. In one fluid motion, the Tiger King reached behind his back with one paw, dug his claws into Cotton Ball's back. In one fluid motion, the Tiger King reached behind his back with one paw, dug his claws into Cotton Ball's neck, and swung his target overhead, slamming the rabbit into the ground beneath him. He pinned the rabbit to the ground. He pinned Cotton Ball. He pinned Cotton Ball to the ground as he brushed off the bleeding wound and he pinned Cotton Ball to the ground as he licked more blood from his paw. From off his paw. He pinned Cotton Ball to the ground as he licked more blood from his paw. Blood dripped onto Cotton Ball's face, onto Cotton Ball's white. Blood dripped down. Blood dripped down onto the rabbit's white, furry, scarred face. The Tiger King bent down and whispered something into the rabbit's ear. The rabbit's demeanor changed as he curled up into a ball and mumbled incoherently, even ignoring the claw wounds from his bleeding stomach, his white fur turning red with blood. The Tiger King bent down and whispered something into the rabbit's ear. The rabbit's demeanor changed as he curled up into a ball and mumbled incoherently, even ignoring the claw wounds from his bleeding stomach, his white fur turning red with blood. Who else challenges me? He roared at the room. The Tiger King licked blood off his claws. Over the tip of one bloodied claw, he glanced down. You, Straw? Scarecrow mumbled, please, fighting isn't show me your strength. Survive and a demon hunting, we will go. The Tiger King boomed, his laughter bouncing around the room. He strode to the open hall and he strode to the hole in the wall, raising his arms to either side and roaring to the sky. Today is a good day to die. Ready the prisoners. Let the fight begin. Scarecrow fell onto his back, feeling defeated as he eyed the mix of tiger, rabbit, and wolf blood pooling across the stone floor. How was he supposed to survive when he didn't even recall how to fight in the first place? How was he supposed to survive when he didn't even know how to fight in the first place? How was he going to survive when he didn't even know how to fight in the first place? Damn, that's a good chapter. Woo! All right. Man, I'm really happy how that Oh man, I'm really happy. Dang, that the Tiger King chapter is actually really cool. It makes the Tiger King really like a little bit of a crazed monarch. I'm really happy at how that chapter's come out. That's a good chapter. So very, very happy with that. Yeah, I think the chapter does all the right things. I wasn't sure the first half of the chapter is clearly what took a little longer to get through in the past day, but I think today I'm pretty happy with how that chapter came out. Yeah, man, it's a good sized chapter too. There's a lot that happens in that chapter. Wow. And then of course we're getting to one of the craziest chapter 25. The next chapter is literally probably one of the first craziest chapters in this entire book. Fight of the First. Oh man. This chapter is so crazy. I was like, oh, I want to work on it right now. But unfortunately, that's not happening. So we made good time, did about 2 hours. I'm so glad I was able to get through the rest of the Tiger King chapter as I am getting closer to finishing the third draft of the second act, which is good. We got about 3, 4, 5 chapters, which got some crazy stuff going on. So thank you all for joining. Glad you were able to stick around today, hang out with me in this little co-working session. I appreciate you. I'll be back tomorrow for another daily writing sprint stream. We'll probably do it early on in the day, but tomorrow's chapter is going to be epic. Tomorrow is the epic first Coliseum chapter, which is crazy. So make sure to come join. I'll be back tomorrow, and tap that like button if you enjoyed the stream. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. Words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. It's time to write
Right
now.
Sorry.
Right now, not right now, but right now. Read now, right now. Is that right?
Words are wind, but stories are forever.